Hello, everyone. My name is Saeed. I'm the founder and CEO of Next to Stars. I'm super happy today to be with Joshua Schachnow, and we're going to talk about a very important yet pressing topic. Uh, so, uh, Quick introduction. There are some stats flowing that there are around uh, up to 5 million people living in Canada on temporary resident status. And if we put this beside the already scaled back quotas or caps on permanent residency, and obviously like the new people that are going to join the queue, it points to a very long wait time for these temporary residents to obtain a permanent residence status in Canada. Many of these people, if they have intentions of staying longer term in Canada, are thinking, am I going to be forced to leave? Or what are my options when it comes to my future in Canada? So that's the question, the main question that I'm going to try to address today with Josh. Joshua is an immigration lawyer, founder of a technology company called Visto.ai that serves immigration lawyers and consultants. And we are going to have a very insightful conversation, hoping to provide some practical solutions, some practical insights to millions of people that are kind of in the limbo right now. Hello, Josh. Welcome to the program.
Hey, Saeed, thank you very much for having me back on the show. And as you said, I think it's a pressing topic, and I hope it'll be a helpful and interesting conversation.
Thank you. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. Josh, I think the first question that comes to people's mind, and I have many of them around me. You know, a lot of people are living here on work permit or a student visa. They're thinking if push comes to shove, and we are hearing, some contradictory viewpoints from our government officials. Basically calling for like them having to leave and whatnot. What are the options? What can realistically happen if I am a temporary resident status holder and my permit is about to expire? What are my options, and what are the potential outcomes of like what will realistically happen?
Yeah, I mean it's a broad question that I'm going to try and unpack here. I'm concerned. I think going to your earlier point, it's if you look at the numbers, it's not going to be a pretty couple years for those looking to get PR inside Canada. We've read reports anywhere from like 3 to 5 million temporary residents inside Canada. As you mentioned, the government just reduced the quota for permanent residents, right? So the goal for 2025 is about 395,000 PR approvals. So let's do some math. Let's take the lower number, 3 million, right? 3 million temporary residents inside Canada right now. Now, a temporary resident visa might be anywhere from 1 year to 3 years, something in between, something less, et cetera, et cetera. Those are going to expire. And as I'll get to in just a second, there are some options based on, what your situation is. But if we do the math, 395,000 divided by 3+ million, that's like 10%, right? A little bit more, roughly, right? So that means if we don't accept a single additional temporary resident over the next 2, 3, 4 years, which we will, it would still take 8 or 9 years to get all of the current temporary residents PR status. But the problem is, and now I'm going to start answering your question, some people will not have that much time, right? Some people's visas might be expiring next month. Some might be expiring in a year and a half or 8 months or whatever. And PR has been so difficult to get, especially with what's been done with the quota and the new adjustments to express entry, that a lot of people are going to have their permits expire and they might not have an option, right? So that's one part of the answer is like you quite literally might not have another option, right? So let me walk you through a few of the options, keeping in mind, and I'll give the classic lawyer caveat, right? It depends, and every situation is a little bit different. And just because I say, hey, this is an option doesn't guarantee that it's going to work for you, right? There's 3 temporary resident statuses: visitor, student, and worker, right? Depending on which one you are, might depend which options you have. For example, if you're a worker, you might have a relatively easier time to extend if you have support from your company, right? They might be willing to submit an LMI application to support a work permit extension, or maybe you're already here. Maybe your work permit's already supported by an LMI. So when you're getting close to when your current work permit is expiring, you have the company apply for another LMI so that you can extend the work permit to buy you more time to hopefully help you get PR.
Mhm.
If you're a student, it kind of depends, right? Like, are you finishing up your program? Are you eligible for the PGWP or not? Are you interested in maybe doing another program, right? Because the interesting X factor here, Saeed, is within the next 11-ish months, we're going to have an election, right? 11, I think, at the latest. And so we're going to have all these talks about what should we do? What are the strategies? Blah, blah, blah. And then if and when, not to make this political, but if and when the conservatives win, what are they going to do? Are they going to keep a lot of the same? Are they going to make a lot of big differences? Is this conversation that we're going to have right now going to be irrelevant in 12 months based on what the conservatives do? I don't know, right? We'll have to wait and see. But there's still plenty of time until that election, and there's going to be a lot of visas expiring before that election, which is why we're having a conversation like this. If you're a visitor, can you extend your visit? Can you try to get a job and be sponsored through an LMIA? Now, you might still have to leave and come back depending on what your situation is, because now there's only certain scenarios where you can apply for a work permit from inside Canada. But do you want to maybe go to school? Do you want to look at, I mean, we a whole other topic we could talk about is the LMIA fraud that's going on, right? Because that's one of the things some people are doing to try and stay, right? Is basically illegally buying LMIAs. I'll end this question with a quick note on two applications that, for better or worse, have become very popular in the last 6 to 12 months, which is refugees, and I'll put some air quotes, refugees, because there are plenty of legitimate refugee claims. But what we've seen is an absolute explosion in refugee claims where probably a lot of them are not genuine. They're fraudulent. They shouldn't be submitted, right, for a wide variety of reasons, as well as H&C, so humanitarian and compassionate grounds application, which is a permanent residence application that's kind of like, I'll kind of call it like a catch-all, right? Like, hey, you're inside Canada, you're not eligible for this, you can't get invited for that, you're not a refugee, blah blah blah. So it's kind of like, hey, do we have humanitarian and compassionate grounds? Which, we're not going to get into details of like exactly what the eligibility for that is, but it's kind of like a last ditch. Hey, can I get PR if I meet a few of their requirements? That also, the number of applications filed has exploded. Why? Because of exactly what we're talking about. There's all these people whose visas and permits are coming up for expiration. They don't have other options. And so they're turning to whatever they possibly can to try and maintain their status and stay in Canada. So long answer, but loaded question. So hopefully that's helpful.
Actually, Josh, this is exactly what I love about having you on this show, because you break things down in a very logical manner, and it's like it's very scenario based. So if I want to recap, then if I am on a temporary residence permit here and I'm a worker, the odds are a little bit better for me. Are more in my favor. I can ask my employer to sponsor an extension to my visa. If I'm a student, then I have to find a job. And you rightfully pointed out that one of the challenges that we currently have is these fraudulent LMIA applications, like for cases that there is plenty of local permanent resident citizens available to take on that role, but yet they get LMIAs to hire like a foreign worker. But so those are the options. So they have to change either their status. They can go for the refugee path, obviously, if they have the grounds for it. But one group of temporary residents right now in Canada are the ones that are on these special programs. Like there's the Iran policy, there's the earthquake policy for the Turkish people, and these like a special measures, I think they call, and it gives the candidates a 3-year, 4-year work permit with no clear pathway for permanent residency. What options are available for them? Is it any different, or about the same?
A little bit different, but a little bit the same as well, right? So there's almost like two questions that we're actually talking about here. Number one is how do you extend, and or number two, how do you get PR, right? Because if you come here on a 3-year permit, the first thing you should be asking is, because you still have 3 years, right? So the first thing you should be asking is, what is the best pathway for me to get PR? And then, like, for example, let's say you landed here today on a special measures 3-year work permit and you called me because you wanted help. My advice would be, hey, let's not worry about the extension yet. You have 36 months. Let's spend the first 2 years focusing on how to get you permanent residence. If that second year is coming to an end and there's still no PR in sight, okay, now we want to shift focus a little bit to what can we do to extend, right? So, for example, I spoke to someone a few weeks ago and she came on a special measures work permit, and it wasn't even coming time to expire. It was the fact that she couldn't get a high enough express entry score and they weren't eligible under any PNPs. And she's really anxious about getting PR, understandably. And so the route that they took was going the LMIA route. She was already working for a company, very smart, very accomplished, and her company loved her. And the company was willing to sponsor her on an LMIA, which gives you bonus points, so that she would have a much better chance of applying through express entry. So this is very much a holistic approach, right, Saeed? How much longer do you have on your current permit? Based on your current permit, what are your options? Based on your current profile, what do your PR options look like? Are they good? Are they bad? Right. So it's really hard. It's really hard these days. And now you have special measures, this and exemptions opening and closing and this and that. Like even the experts, even us immigration lawyers and the consultants that are trying to keep up is a part-time job, right? Because of all these changes. We had an episode a few weeks ago just going over the changes. Like we could have spoke for 5 hours just about the changes we've seen in the last year, right? So it's really difficult. On the student side, I just want to mention what you brought up. Like again, there's more than one option of finding a job. You can apply to study some more, right? Maybe you're finishing up an undergrad or you're finishing up a college diploma and you can't get a job. It's a tough market out there, especially if you have to try and convince a company to sponsor you. You can try to apply for another program, maybe for a master's or maybe for, you know what I mean? So, there are more than one option. That it just calls into question what's the best option given your situation, given your bank account. Can you afford to go study more, right? We all know what the international tuition fees are like in this country. So there's all these moving pieces. It really depends on the person, the situation, the PR prospects, the extension prospects. It's tough, man. I'm telling you, I've been saying this for about a year. It's going to get really ugly in terms of what is going to happen with temporary residents. I hate to say it, but just look at the numbers, right? It's all math, not all, but it's mostly math to see that this probably isn't going to end well.
I think like that's exactly like I put my engineer hat on. It's just like number wise, like realistically, as you mentioned, it's gonna take 8, 9, 10 years to clear the backlog, and that is considering if there's no new applicants that are gonna enter in the queue, which will happen. Like there are people that come here for master's program, for PhDs, for elite colleges that do offer like the public colleges and whatnot, and they might want to have aspirations of staying in Canada.
Well,
Understand?
look at the recent levels plan. For the
Yeah.
first time ever, the government set quota for temporary residents. There's going to be the quota is a little bit over, I think it's like 300 and something thousand for students and workers. So
It's
every year that we approve 395 roughly thousand permanent residents, they're basically being not replaced. Replaced isn't the right word, but almost that many new temporary residents are coming in as well. So something's got to give. At that rate, it's going to be decades before it gets kind of like cleared out. I don't think cleared out is the right way to put it, because realistically, and this goes to your earlier question too, like not every temporary resident is going to get PR in Canada. It's not possible. Number one, from a math perspective. And number two, the changes they've made, especially to permanent residents like express entry programs, there's just going to be people that won't be able to get a high enough score or won't be eligible. Right. So
That is like facts of the matter. And I'm like sitting here and thinking, if I'm a temporary resident holder right now and I like think like I don't have the in my bank account, I can't go for another program, I can't afford to change my visa or whatnot. Like, what is the last option? Am I gonna get deported? And what will happen then? Like, am I gonna get a little letter? Like, logistically and mechanically, what is gonna be the process there?
Yeah, well, maybe what I'll do first is I'll highlight what I would look into if I was in that situation, right? First. So, really quickly. And again, this is going to depend on your profile and your background and your bank account, et cetera, et cetera. Number one, calculate your express entry score. If it's below 500, you're going to be in big trouble for quite some time. What you want to look at for express entry, unless you're eligible through one of the industry specific draws, right? So, do you have a knock code that meets the requirements for the STEM draw, the healthcare draw, the trades draw, the transpo draw, the French speaking draw? If you speak French, you're fine, right? Which is almost like kind of funny how much they're promoting French. If you speak French, you got nothing to worry about. But look up those 6 express entry industry specific draws. Number one. If you fall under one of those, that's a good thing. It's not a guarantee, but it's a good thing. Step number 2 is look into PNPs, right? Based on what province you're living in, or what province you've studied in, or what provinces you might be willing to move to, right? And take a look at those. You get a PNP, you get 600 points, you're basically in the clear. Easier said than done. But if you get the PNP approved, you're in a really good spot. So take a look at PNPs, provincial nominee programs. Now, number 3, this is for those of you who are employed or are very employable. Look at the LMIA, which will require you to be sponsored by a company legally, right? So, like, I'm not going to touch on any of the shady stuff. We don't promote any LMIA fraud or anything like that. You should never have to pay for an LMIA. If a company or a professional or an agent or a ghost consultant or whatever is asking you to pay money for an LMIA, turn the other way. They're breaking the law, right? Whether they get caught or not, they're breaking the law, and you don't want to get caught up in that. And you don't want to break the law, because if you get caught, good luck ever getting PR. So those, I would say, if you, as you said, you can't afford to study, um, you know, these are kind of the best options that I would look into right now. So number 1, the industry specific draws. Number 2, PNPs. Number 3, can you reasonably get an LMIA from a company that would give you, number 1, it allows you to extend. Number 2, it gives you at minimum 50 bonus points for express entry and makes that a much better option. Okay. Now let's say you can't and things are expiring, right? When you lose status, you're supposed to leave the country, right? In a weird way, there's like not really a mechanism for Canada tracking who's leaving, right? So on the ground, like if your visa expires today, you're not going to get a knock on the door tomorrow saying get out of the country, right? Eventually, you'll probably get a letter saying restore your status or get out of the country. But from what I know, I'm going to give another caveat. I don't really do like deportation work. I don't do that kind of stuff. I've done mostly economic immigration over the years. So that's why, especially when it comes to express entry, PNPs, LMIA, stuff like that, I would say I'm quite well versed. But when it comes to deportation and status restoration and stuff like that, that's not my area of expertise. So I would actually recommend like finding a lawyer that specializes in that kind of stuff. You can apply to restore your status or change your status, I believe, to remain a visitor, right? So maybe you're a student or you're a worker and your current permit's expiring. You can try to apply to change your status to a visitor, keeping in mind that you then won't be able to study or work, respectively, right? So if your study permit's expiring, you're not eligible for a PGWP or an extension, you can apply to change your status as a visitor, make sure you meet all the requirements. Same if you're a worker, maybe you have a special what were we just saying? Like the special
Special measures. Yeah.
Special measures work permit or a PGWP or an open work permit of some sort, and that's expiring and you can't get an LMIA, you can't get sponsored by a company, you can't apply to change your, you should be able to, again, double check the requirements given your situation to change your status as a visitor. But again, keep in mind, you then can't work or study, right? So again, that's a whole other conversation of, well, then what are you going to do? Are you going to be able to afford yourself? Can you move in with friends or family or something like that? So another loaded topic, another loaded question, and lots to consider. But hey, these are the tough conversations we have to be having, right?
And Josh, like I suppose these are the conversations that like the policymakers have to think about, because like physically, if we want to, like, if 1.3 or 2 million, like there are numbers floating that they have to leave the country by next year. So how are you going to enforce this? You know, are you going to track them? And the last thing I think we want to have is like millions of people like living undocumented. 'Cause that's like, that is really, a very, very, very bad situation that, really puts the brand at risk. It really might even have impacts on the value of a Canadian passport. Like these are
It
some,
already is. Look at
yeah,
what Trump is saying, right? So you're 100% right, because just the fact that Canada, according to Donald Trump, is, so, there is that caveat, but Canada, according to Donald Trump, is a safety risk right now to the US border because of a lot of the people that we've let in and the lack of vetting we've been doing, the lack of management. And now, as you said, people are going to have permits expiring, they're going to be losing status. And what if they look to run south, right? So this is one of my biggest concerns. And I've been saying this for about a year now. If our government, in my opinion, continues to overreact and not do this strategically enough, they already are and will continue to hurt brand Canada. Maybe in the short term, it's actually not a horrible thing because we have to fix what the heck they've created here. But let's shift ahead. Let's try to think a little bit longer term, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road. Things are going to swing back. And especially when markets pick up and the world goes back to normal and, the economies are moving a little bit better, we're still going to have a worker shortage, right? People love to hate on immigration right now, but people don't realize that there's more than one type of immigration, right? Okay, maybe you're against all these students and undocumented this and blah blah blah. But don't don't miss out on the fact that if we want to bring in the leading AI talent and companies, heck, if you want our farmers to be able to pick enough fruit in the summer, we
yes.
need skilled immigration, right? So it's not going anywhere. And eventually, in a few years, when things kind of settle down, we're still going to need and want to attract the best and brightest. So my concern is if we tarnish the brand too much in 3 to 5 years or whenever, even today we need skilled workers, we're hurting the brand and those best and brightest might start looking to other countries. Now, to
A-
your point, like
Absolutely.
I don't know what they're going to do. It's going to be, I mean, that'll be more at the policy level, right? To see if and what they decide to do about it. But the other consideration, Saeed, is like when right now the government is paying refugees something like $80,000 to $85,000 a year to sit at home in Canada, right? So I've read reports and articles and stuff like that that's actually saying, again, there's plenty of genuine refugees, there's plenty of people who should be here and deserve to stay here, et cetera, et cetera. But I think we can all agree that there's also a lot of people that probably shouldn't, right? They're either illegal or they're making non-genuine refugee claims or their stuff has expired and really they should be gone. So it's the opportunity cost, or I guess the comparison cost of like, well, how much does it cost the government right now to house a non-genuine refugee? It's like $80,000 a year or more versus the cost of putting them on a flight. Like, do the math. It's actually way cheaper. They could probably start chartering planes from Air Canada. I'm not saying that they should do this, right? But like in theory, it would be cheaper to start chartering planes and shipping the wrong people out than, providing all the social benefits and support and stuff that we do. Again, big conversation, and we're kind of covering it in broad strokes, but just something to think about.
Well, it is a very, and I totally agree. Like, look, I've always like whoever that comes to me for advice, the first one of the most important decisions that immigrant to Canada is going to ever make is the representative that they're working with. So it's more important than ever that you work with the right person, with the right lawyer or consultant that's not involved in shady business, that doesn't just see you as a bucket of money, and that just, try to fit you into programs that it's like virtually impossible for you to have a luck, and they deceive you. It's very important. Work with reputable people, work with people that are above the board and they really care about you and care about also their own business license, brand, whatnot. They're not gonna like, mislead you into taking on programs that really they're not the best fit for you, like including refugee. And absolutely, that's one of the biggest problems that we have. I totally agree. There are some genuine refugees, and we shouldn't really, close our doors to them. But obviously, like I think everybody can agree that we don't want to support, fraudulent claims, people that are perfectly fine otherwise, and they also exploit, some of the goodwill. So, but even like getting a ticket and sending people back, like there's an economic impact, like Josh, like a real economic impact to the tune of billions of dollars, because these people are not going to go to the single destination, right? So it's going to be like require a lot of coordination that frankly, like one can argue is beyond the capacity of an already stretched, situation. So like I don't know, but maybe like as you said, like maybe this is a temporary sentiment. And maybe what we do is like we just like create a policy that extends because these people are already here, right? So they whatever the economic damage, impact, whatnot is already like we are experiencing. So you can either lure people to leave, like these are other alternatives. And a lot of people come to us, they say, "Oh, what else I can do?" You know. Um, and we'll get to that question, but it's a loaded question, as you said. It's a loaded topic.
I think everyone has been, but it's trying times, right? Like I don't know what the right answer is. I think that number one, even with all the negative immigration sentiment, I don't think people fully appreciate how badly they screwed up for such a long period of time. And again, I don't want to make this too political, but we as citizens of the country or PRs or, whatever, whoever's listening, like we got to hold some people accountable, right? Because still not really anyone's been held accountable, right? This has been monumental mismanagement for years. And they were warned years ago, right? And you didn't even have to be warned years ago because you could look at the numbers years ago, right? 2, 3 years ago when they were letting in 600 plus thousand international students a year that were all going to study business admin. Gee, I wonder how that's going to pan out, right? So, like most people, especially the experts and the people in the industry, myself and a few colleagues have basically been warning about this myself for the last couple years. I know some people who called this 5 years ago just by looking at the trends and where the numbers are going. So this has been a terrible, terrible screw up. You don't get into a situation like this overnight, right? It's been 10 years in the making. It's extremely disappointing. And it's a terribly hard earned lesson that we and probably our kids are going to be paying for, right? In one way or another, whether it's through taxes, increased taxes, all the, social stuff that's going to have to be covered, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't know what they're going to do, Saeed, because the problem is, here's what I think the problem is. Like I've seen and heard rumblings of like, do we have another TR to PR? Right. So for those who don't know, around I think it was early 2022, there was, middle of COVID, et cetera, et cetera. And There was no travel. So instead of continuing to, at that point in time, there were a decent amount of people getting in through express entry from outside of Canada. But because of COVID and a lack of travel and et cetera, the government decided, hey, you know what? Let's launch a special TR to PR, which is actually, I think, even within the name of this show that we're doing right now, which means temporary residence to permanent residence pathway. So they created a special program. It was open for a few months where if you met a few requirements and you were inside Canada, you could just apply right for PR. And they invited, tens and tens of thousands of people through that to kind of like clear out the TRs to PR. The problem this time is number one, there's way more people, right? And number two, number two, the sentiment towards immigration is very different, right? So what I'm seeing the government do is whatever they can do to make the voters happy, because that's what some of these politicians do. And so the question in my head is, with so much negative immigration sentiment right now, is this current government going to implement another TR to PR program? Would that be a smart move politically, right? Now, from the immigration standpoint, I think another reason why a lot of people would be against it is because all of the temporary residents are not necessarily amazing fits for what Canada wants right now for PR, right? Not to offend anybody. I'm just saying we have programs like Express Entry and PNPs that are targeting certain people. But as I said before, the government and the schools allowed for years hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people to get study permits for let's be real here, not everybody, but a good amount of them for not very valuable programs. Some of them we've now found out were forging documents to get in to begin with. They were using fake acceptance letters. They were using fake bank statements. They were using fake IELTS results. So we have this huge pool of temporary residents, and there's plenty of them that are great. They're in temporary residents inside Canada right now. Plenty of them who are great. I've met many of them, right? Great, smart, educated, et cetera. They would make our country better, no doubt. But there's also an amount, I don't know what the number is, right? 50%, 25%, 10%, I don't know. But even 10%, we're talking hundreds of thousands of people that are probably not who we want to become permanent residents in Canada. So again, it begs the question, do we want to just sweep all those people? I hate to say it like this and talk about people in this way, but like, do we just kind of sweep it under the rug and say, hey, here's PR? I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how it pans out. And then would that numbers count towards the quota, right? Because now the quota is 395,000 PRs for 2025. If they do a TR to PR program, where does that fit in the quota? Does it count towards the quota? Is it an exemption or an exception to the quota? So I'm giving you maybe more questions than answers, but these are the things that I'm thinking about because we're gonna have to keep an eye out and see what they do over the next few months or the next year or two.
I agree. I think like no one has like all the answers right now because like it's an ever changing, it's a very uncertain situation right now. As you mentioned, like it's a part-time job to even stay on top of what is going on, whether the new changes. Just like a couple of days ago, there was a change to the designated learning institutions that came out. So we have to wait and see how does that impact potentially, the student visa and all that, that industry, that space in the next coming months. But Josh, if I want to kind of like recap thus far. So if you speak French, you're fine, generally speaking, right? If you, and I don't, like people come and ask me, like, first of all, like we're not an immigration firm, but just because of the nature of our work, because we are serving immigration firms with business immigration clients, just the fact that also like I'm myself an immigrant to Canada, a lot of people come and ask me questions, like they're like, oh, should we start this like learning French? And I'm like, yeah, as a second language, but it's gonna take a lot of work, I suppose, for you to get to like the level that you can actually get a good test results like in French. And what are you gonna do with that? Are you gonna move to Quebec or whether like that's gonna be a skill added to you, and I'm all for it, like for being bilingual, multilingual, but one has to really think, like strategically about their time, about their resources. So if you already speak French, good for you. It's amazing. You have a very good chance. If you work in construction, and again, like we don't want people that are forging themselves, paying for LMIs in construction, and then they don't have any passion, they have any skills in that, you're not gonna succeed in Canada in construction if you don't really know what you're doing. You're in a good luck. If you're in healthcare, like it's good chance. But if you're not in any of these categories and your score is under 500, it's like a strategic move for you is probably to look into different provinces, and if they have any program that like for rural areas or whatnot that you can probably relocate and take advantage of. Is that a fair kind of summary of pathways, conversations that we've had thus far for people that are currently in Canada on temporary resident for PR?
Yeah, I would say look at PNPs. Again, go to your employer, see if they're willing to support you with something like an LMIA. Consider going back to school if you can, just to kind of buy you some more time. Now it's gotten a lot harder to get a study permit, or I should say a study permit that's then eligible for a PGWP, right? Like no program's been overhauled more than the study permit in the last year. It seems like every month they're doing something else to kind of gut or change that program. But yeah, those are some of the key things I would consider. I would definitely say work with someone reliable. Doesn't have to be me. I don't do much file work anymore. But if you want, I can introduce you to somebody who does, right? We provide software to regulated Canadian immigration firms across the country that have a wide range of experience. So I can probably introduce people to somebody good. But yeah, I think people take and I can't really relate because I've only ever lived in Canada as a citizen. I'm very lucky. I've never been in their shoes. But breaking the law, it's like maybe you won't feel a short-term pain, but you'll probably feel it long-term, right? Buying that LMIA, forging that document, well, okay, maybe you get your first permit approved, but like if this comes up later and you get rejected or banned, like not only are you going to have trouble in Canada, but any form in almost any country that you might want to apply to down the road is going to ask you if you've ever been refused or denied or banned from a country, right? Like Canada and some other countries like the US, Australia, UK, et cetera, et cetera. I think some of them even share data.
Yes.
So if you are really trying to make it in Canada, but if Canada's not going to work, your plan B is the UK, don't be surprised if doing something illegal here actually burns you way down the road as well. Don't take the short-term gain for the long-term pain working with shady service providers. So I would definitely echo that message.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with you. But a question that I think a lot of people should ask themselves, like, obviously you're immigrating for a purpose, for a reason, and Canada is an amazing country. It's always been the destination for the ambitious, the skilled, but if at what point, like, and we want all the good people to remain, stay in Canada and all that, but at what point do you think someone should think about alternatives? As we do at Nextstars, we do a startup visa to other countries as well. We've done to Netherlands, to Finland. Obviously, our first go-to is Canada. We love people to come to Canada, but Canada is not right for everyone, especially right now. So like if I want to put my like like as the interest of the client, at some point I have to be able to like discuss with them like, hey, like these are other options. So what are your thoughts on that? What is the like the candidate that you kind of be like, what? I don't see a realistic pathway for you in the next like 3 to 4 years. So
Yeah, I spoke about this with a colleague yesterday, which is because we obviously help firms with their technology, but I also end up talking to them about other things like business and how to help clients and stuff like that. And he was saying, do you have any other advice? I talked to this client this morning and told them they don't really have any good options. And he told me their profile, and I was like, they don't really have any good options. Like when it comes to immigration, if you're this is one of the problems with working with shady or bad service providers is they'll just find you a solution so that they can sell you something.
Exactly.
The best immigration professionals will tell you if and when you actually don't have a good chance in Canada. And you might not like to hear it, but it's better to know it than for them to rip you or scam you at a 5, 10, 50K for something that you actually have no chance of getting from the beginning, right? Or like a 2% chance or whatever, right? So, anyways, on to your question. It's really the people who don't fit into my earlier answer, where I would say you don't really have great long term chances here, right? So, for example, if you work in none of the express entry industry specific roles, if you don't have any support from any employer, and you don't have more than like 2 years, a year and a half, 2 years on your current permit, it's going to be really tough, right? Like look at the express entry draws. They're so high. Number one, they don't even do FSW draws anymore, right?
Yeah.
They're doing CEC in the 500s, right? Like it's getting up to like almost the mid 500s, which is
Yes.
crazy, right?
Yeah.
Because like pre-COVID, all the draws were in the 400s. Now we're seeing CEC draws in the like 530s and 540s. So they're only doing CEC draws, which I'm assuming will continue because of their in Canada focus for 2025. They're doing PNP draws, which I've mentioned before. If you can make a PNP work, you should probably try to. Or the only cases where they're doing draws with score requirements of under 500 is the industry specific draws. So like if you're a French speaker, healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. But even some of the industry specific draws, they haven't been doing too many of. So the score requirement is still high. So if you're looking at those express entry draws and the numbers don't make sense, if you explore a couple PNPs and you're not really eligible for any of them, if you don't have an employer that might be willing to support you in the form of an LMIA or a PNP, it's going to be a really, really hard year or two for you. And if you don't see any of that really changing, or if you have a plan B already, you may want to start looking into that, right? Now, especially when we're talking about PR, like there's different timelines based on what you're looking for. It's typically easier and faster to get a temporary permit than a permanent residence, PR card or PR status. So if you're running out of time, if you've got less than a year left, you're not getting PR in less than a year unless you fall under one of those very specific situations, right? So it's probably time to start looking at plan B. It's crazy because like 3-4 years ago, if we go back 4 years and say, hey, Josh, hey, Saeed, this is what you're going to be talking about, I'd say you're crazy. What are you talking about? Right? Canada, world renowned immigration program, et cetera, et cetera. And here we are. But again, this is what happens when you have like gross mismanagement of the immigration system as well as some other systems, and just no foresight or management or modeling, right? Like numerical modeling. So somebody missed out there.
I think, absolutely. And then this is what I tell to people. I think this is the message. If you have like 2 years, a year and a half in Canada and you don't fit any of these profiles, you're not that hopeful. I think it's a lot better of a scenario if you willingly choose to entertain another option. And if you want to, for example, go to a European country, I'm sure it's a lot easier for you to get a visa to, let's say, Netherlands from their embassy in Canada than, back home. You're very like you can justify your case. You don't have to be honest with them that I don't have any chances here. You can build a story for a new country and kind of put yourself in the decision making seat, and look, it's an amazing country, but it may not be the right country for everyone, right? So you might have a better chance, I don't know, in Finland, in Netherlands, in Malta, in like Spain. There's so many different countries with different Singapore, there's so many destinations for people, and maybe you can go and wait out and then come back, maybe in a few years with another status. So I will have one last question, and then we'll take a look at the Q&A, see if there's any questions there. But when you talk to the colleagues, if you want to end on a hopeful note, are you discussing of any new measures program that might come down the pipeline? Obviously, government change is a big factor, or like an election, like not necessarily government change, but the election is a big factor that puts many of the policies or like new programs into a little bit of a freeze. But what are you hearing about? Is there any rumors, obviously, without like holding you accountable for it, but anything hopeful that you hear that might come down the pipeline that you can share with us?
Yeah, I don't really know, Saeed, especially because a lot of the recent changes have come out of nowhere, right? Like the best example I have is the SDS program. One week, Mark Miller is promoting international students in, I think it was Ottawa or Montreal. The next week, Friday at 4:30 p.m., they close the SDS program, right, with no heads up. So probably my biggest gripe with IRCC, honestly, is transparency. Like, okay, people are going to make mistakes. We don't expect anyone to be perfect. Government agencies aren't going to be perfect. But there's so little transparency, and that makes it so much harder, right? It's already hard for people trying to navigate these programs and systems. And just the lack of transparency, we don't know what's going to come and go with programs. We don't know what the express entry draws are going to look like. Like pre-COVID, I would do a consultation and I'd be like pretty certain in giving pretty strong advice to people on, what was going to happen soon and what their chances are with express entry and stuff like that. And now you have conversations with people and we're like, we have no clue what's happening next month,
Yes.
right? Do I have a good shot for express entry? I don't know. I can't really tell you, right? Here's the last 2 months trend, but like, you know what I mean? So if anyone, I mean, I don't know how far and wide we're going to reach here. If there's anyone in government, like just a little bit of transparency, I think would go so far for the aspiring immigrants and for the professionals that are trying to give them the best advice. The only other stuff I see in here is like further changes and reductions. I wish we could end on a more positive note, but like I don't know if anything is going into growth mode. I don't think immigration and growth can be in the same sentence for the next year or two until things shift or the government changes. But even if the conservatives win, which it's looking like they will, I don't think they're going to shift anything into major growth mode, right? Probably the most promising might be like a TR to PR type pathway, but I have no clue if they're going to do it again, right? I don't know if they have, as I mentioned earlier.
And even last time that they did, I don't think it had the greatest PR, outcome. I remember reading articles, about that this has been done like hasty or whatnot. It was like in the news.
They rolled it out quickly. The processing was slow. It was a pain. Understandably, that's what usually happens with special programs. But yeah, I if I had to guess, I would say that they're not going to do it again because number one, the way the first one went, and number two, like they can just keep doing CEC draws. That's effectively the same thing, right?
Mhm.
Canadian Experience Class CEC is a branch within Express Entry for those who have at least 1 year of Canadian work experience. So,
Mhm.
like, I actually had a lot of, like, I didn't like the TR to PR program. I said this back then. I was like, why don't they just do a big CEC draw? Because what people don't understand, what some people, if you're not like an expert on immigration, is it takes them a lot of time and resources to create a new program, train processing agents, build their portal, which sucked, and then actually implement the processing, right? That takes people, time, energy, money, et cetera, et cetera. Why didn't they just use CEC? Why didn't they just do a 28,000 person CEC draw, right? It
Yeah.
would have saved all of that stuff. The processes are already in place, et cetera, et cetera. So again, I wish I had a little bit more positive stuff to end on. I do think that for the right people, you know, you don't have to give up on Canada. To what you said earlier, like number one, hey, maybe you want to bounce to plan B for a couple of years and then, you know, things will shift back in a few years. Maybe depending on your situation, you go home for a few years, let things cool down, let things adjust. Now, you know, some people may not have or want or be able to go home, but for those who can, you know, go home, save some money, relax, keep an eye on things, and, you know, when the time is right, try to bounce back.
Yes, thank you so much. This was, I think, although we didn't have, concrete solutions, but I think like if one listens to this conversation, it can clarify uh, a lot of things in their mind, as they're looking into it, for like looking out for their future. And like immigration is a very emotional decision. People, they have families, their kids have friends, it's not an easy decision or like turn on and off a switch and then I'm out or in, people make decisions that impact their life. People, encounter many difficulties as they're trying to settle in a new country. And I wish, as you said, like we can wish for transparency, we can wish for also setting the expectations, right from the get-go. If when people are making the decision to move to Canada, they know exactly what they're gonna face, what is like the timeline that they're gonna be looking at. And also I think we can all call for better uh oversight on some of the players that are effectively the agents of brand Canada globally. So there are two questions that have been posted in the Q&A. One is like very relevant to the topic, and one is a bit irrelevant, but I will still pose it to you if you want to answer. First one is, if you are in a skilled trade job, I'm eligible for PNP. I'm a bit confused about the company revenue to be eligible. Does the company revenue still apply in EE skilled trade? I'm not sure what does that mean, but I think it's the requirements of the company to support one for the PNP.
Yeah, so Katrina, I mean, my first question would be what province? My first guess, based on your question, would be this is in Ontario, but there are other provinces that have skilled trade streams. So, what I would do if I were you is look up the respective PNP, because I don't know this off the top of my head, but like for example, for Ontario PNP, in order to go through the employer stream, the employer must meet specific requirements like annual revenue. I don't know off the top of my head if it does apply for EE skilled trade, but for example, if it is Ontario, in 2 minutes, you can just kind of Google, make sure it's the Ontario government website, pull up the stream, and the Ontario government website is quite good at making it clear under each specific stream what the requirements are. I think for every Ontario employer back stream, the company revenue requirement is there. I forget it's what, like a
That 1
minimum.
million, I think, if it's in GTA, and $500,000 for outside GTA. This is, again, check it, Katrina, but this is off top of my head. Uh, uh, I think that's the requirement.
I'll even try and pull up a link while we're
Yeah. But the information I have is like a bit outdated. I checked it maybe a couple of years ago. Um,
well, and the other thing too here that I'm even seeing is there's a skilled trade stream that doesn't have the requirement of a job offer. So I'm going to put that link in the chat. Oh, this is only hosts and panelists.
okay. I can open it up. 1 second. And then maybe just 1 second.
But yeah, Katrina, you're going to want to find, like, for example, there's the skilled trade stream, but then there's also the employer job offer stream. So it depends which one you're talking about, right? And then are you even talking about Ontario, right? I don't know. That was just my guess.
Yes. So yeah, I think for the job, like the regular PNP nomination support, I believe it's the revenue has to be 1 million. That's my, but we can check it and I will like maybe put it in the comment section afterwards. But there it's very clear. You can Google it. It's like as Josh mentioned, it's like depends on different provinces and whatnot. But the second question is from an anonymous attendee that I'm a student. It's been 6 months in Canada. What's the best possible way to bring my boyfriend? We are not married and we were not living together before either.
Well, that's going to be tough because if they're not a spouse or common law partner, then you might not be able to kind of like quote unquote sponsor them, right? It's not really a sponsorship at that point. But basically, if you want them to be eligible for something like an open work permit, you would either have to be married or have to be common law, which by IRCC's definition is living consecutively for 12 months. So if that's not the case, which it sounds like here, then they will probably have to apply on their own, which means they'll have to find their own reason for applying, right? So do they want to come to Canada as an international student? Do they or can they come to Canada as a visitor, right? And live with you and not work for a Canadian company, not go to school in Canada? Um, if this is something that I was talking to you about on a consultation, I would say, give me more information about your boyfriend. Does your boyfriend have a company they want to expand into Canada? Do they have an employer with offices in Canada that they could kind of move them over? But if they're not your spouse or common law partner, then they're probably going to have to find their own way, right? Other than just coming as a visitor to live with you for X amount of time.
So, and to the anonymous viewer, I will put Joshua's contact information in the link that we're going to post on LinkedIn. So you can definitely, I encourage you to get in touch with him, book a consultation, and basically this way you can explain the case in details and get some advice and strategies for your boyfriend. So we're coming to the hours like, and thank you so much again, Josh. This was very insightful for me, cleared a lot of points in my own mind. And because look, like this is something that a lot of people are dealing with right now. And so it's heavy. I think like we didn't have as much positivity and hope and solutions as I would have hoped for. But I think that's the reality of the situation. We are ought to be honest with the audience and practical, but also at the same time realistic. As like the last thing we want to do is like to mislead people, deceive people into having a future well, their odds are not as great. But with that, if you have anything, any last words, please chime in. Otherwise, until the next one.
Yeah, no, just a quick thank you, Saeed, for having me on. I hope everybody found this helpful. Maybe in 6 months we revisit to see how things are going. I wish I could be a little bit more positive, but also don't forget that there's still a quote of 395 plus thousand people are going to get PR next year. It's harder than ever, but if you're kind of in the right place at the right time, it's still possible, right? Nothing, not impossible. I'm just trying to be realistic and set expectations properly. And then lastly, definitely make sure that you're following me, especially on LinkedIn. That's where I probably post my, quote unquote, best stuff. I try to post, post pretty much every day, sharing immigration news updates, things you should be keeping in mind. So definitely make sure to follow me on LinkedIn, and we'll see. It'll continue to be interesting times. So
Uh,
yeah, let's see what
I,
happens.
100% agree. With just one last note, are those like two hockey? Those are for Maple Leaf hockey players, or is it the Flames? Those
They're actually Team Canada. I think
Team
they're Team
Canada.
Canada bobbleheads.
That's
It's
very nice.
I think one is Lemieux and one is, hold on a sec. I can see the names. Mario Lemieux and Joe Sakic. So
Oh, that's
I'm
amazing.
aging myself a little bit here, right? Because they haven't been on a Team Canada for quite some time. But yeah, those are a little bit older. Yeah.
Uh, that's amazing. I love your background. It has some like a lot of books, like in American football and baseball, like all the sports that we hear and follow on the news. Thank you so much, Josh. Again, this was amazing, and I look forward to the next one.
My pleasure. Thanks again for having me.
Of course, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.